Well, on Friday, the Article 32 pretrial hearing for Bradley Manning began at Fort Meade, and it still goes on. Today is, in fact, day 4 of this hearing. As we mentioned to you before, media access has been limited and strictly monitored, and today some of it was blacked out as discussion over the materials in the leaks went forward. Material that the government continues to label as classified, despite it being out in the open, on the internet, written about by most media outlets for all to see. Now, here are a few tidbits from the last few days. So far, 2 witnesses have invoked their rights not to testify in court and incriminate themselves. Special agent within the military's Criminal Investigation Division testified that Manning was arrested based on unconfirmed chat logs. And those chat logs between Manning and Adrian Lameau have been found on Manning's computers, as well as 10,000 cables. But the real kicker from today was that a government digital forensic examiner said that he retrieved communications between Bradley Manning and an online chat user named Julian Assange. So let's get more of those details. Here to discuss this with me is Daniel Ellsberg, former U.S. military analyst who famously leaked the Pentagon Papers in 1971, and Kevin Gostola, civil liberties blogger for Firedog Lake. Gentlemen, I want to thank you both for joining us tonight. And Kevin, I want to start with you because I know that you've been covering this pretrial hearing from the moment that it began, and specifically about this news today, that they think that they found a chat between Manning and another user named Julian Assange. Can you give us more details?
Right, I would say this is the closest that we have gotten to seeing the prosecution actually prove there is some sort of link between Julian Assange and Bradley Manning. And I would say that it is very evident now that Manning was actively seeking out information about WikiLeaks, and the prosecution has raised numerous times that he was interested in Iceland, which was a base of operations.
So in that sense, I mean, can we say that this is kind of damning news for Bradley Manning, or perhaps even for Julian Assange, who has always claimed that he didn't know, or he does not know, who his sources are? What do you think, Daniel?
I would hardly call it damning. I like to think of President Obama as giving credit to Bradley Manning by accusing him of putting out this information. Certainly it's made him my hero and that of a lot of other people. So I wouldn't call it damning.
But what do you think in terms of the case that they're trying to build, the grand jury that's going on in Virginia being built against WikiLeaks, and you know, what Bradley Manning's own fate might be?
So the fear here is that because Paul Almanza, who is the investigative officer presiding, because he has a backstory with the Department of Justice, the fear that the defense has is that they're going to try to flip Bradley Manning and use him to go after Julian Assange, to go get the rest of these characters that we mostly do not know who have affiliations with WikiLeaks. And I guess the more that they back the defense into the corner, the more I would guess a plea bargain deal or some kind during a court-martial hearing would seem to be, would be appealing.
Do you think the defense is being backed into a corner here, though, from the revelations that have been coming out? From what I observed, too, they found 10,000 cables, they said, on Manning's computers, but it wasn't actually any of the information that has been famously leaked, right?
Yeah, and that's confusing. There's a lot of confusing evidence, and I can say that being in the room with the media, we weren't really sure how to read what was said, so I don't want to say too much. But what I will say is that all this information that has been brought out so far, the defense has not taken the stand yet. So they have not mounted their case, and that's important for people to keep in mind because we are reading all these headlines from the prosecution mounting their case, so we would expect that they would have evidence.
All right, so we still don't know exactly. We haven't heard from Bradley Manning himself. I want to hear about the way that they've been treating the media, treating people like yourself, Daniel, in this hearing. Because, like we said, I know that there are a lot of restrictions here. You have to write on a notepad. You can't tweet from inside of there. I believe you got kicked out of the courtroom. Is that correct?
That's true. I'm wearing a coat and tie because because it was a trial. I always wear a coat and tie when I get arrested. But in this case, I wasn't arrested. I was just expelled from the courtroom because when the judge and the prosecutors and the lawyers were out of the room and Bradley was sitting there by himself, and I'd never met him, and he's my hero, it was a chance to say hello. So I went over to him and said, "Hi, Bradley, I'm Daniel Ellsberg." He was looking straight ahead, as he always does. Didn't look back. And I was immediately grabbed and pulled out, they said, against the rules. And they have no written rules, they have no rules, but they make them up as they go along. What struck me was actually that I couldn't think of any reason for that. I've been in a lot of courtrooms. And it really is possible to talk with the defendant, generally.
Is it a military proceeding? Could there be any reason for that?
I've been in a lot of military proceedings. Actually, when I was in the Marines, I was in over 40 special court-martials as a defense counsel or sitting as a judge on the court-martial. I didn't hear anything like that. So, to me, Kevin, maybe you've been following this much closer, it's one more continuation of trying to isolate him as much as possible for everybody, not letting anybody talk, keep a bubble around him. With isolation, with people not really realizing it, that the isolation he was in for 10.5 months was torture. People don't think of it that way because we know people in prison are kept in isolation even for a prolonged period, but they're being tortured. We don't face up to that. What is torture for? It's really a way of getting false confessions. That's what it does. That's what it's for. And in this case, I think they want not only an association with Assange as with some journalist or whoever, they want a very special and unjournalistic kind of thing. They want to show a kind of conspiracy that wasn't your usual journalistic thing. And they want to break him down. To me, what I'm waiting to hear in this particular proceeding, which has to do with whether he should be court-martialed or not, I don't think, it's not at all surprising or even not criticism, that they would start a court-martial proceeding against him. But the idea that it's continuing after the last 18 months, including 10.5 months of total isolation in this thing, which amounts to prolonged torture, protested by Amnesty, protested by human rights commissions everywhere, it's outrageous that this court-martial is continuing. My trial was ended because the judge dismissed all charges on the grounds that there had been a pattern of criminal misconduct, or he didn't say criminal, he said gross governmental misconduct against me that offends a sense of justice. And he dismissed the charges with prejudice.
Would you argue the same thing is going on here?
It's perfectly evident.
I'm curious, too, what does Bradley Manning look like right now? The outside world has not seen him. As we said, he was in solitary confinement for more than 18 months. What does he look like?
Yeah, I mean, this is the first time, just as like you're saying, over 500 days, and he was in confinement, and we're getting the first photos, and they are being taken, and you can see him on AP, and he actually doesn't look that bad for being in confinement for 500 days, to be quite honest. And he sits there, and he scribbles and appears to be taking notes, and looks like he's engaged with the defense team, and so yeah, and it's been very moving, I think, for some of the supporters to see Bradley Manning in person. I think that's been one of the big rewards of coming to attend the hearing.
Well, I have to laugh because in the car over, do you mind my saying, Kevin? I said, I hope you don't mind, but he actually looks surprisingly like, quite a bit like Kevin. And
so we have a twin here. We've got a Bradley Manning twin.
He looks a lot better than his photographs, in a word. He really does.
Daniel, I'm dying to know because before the interview started, you and I were talking about what really sparked the Arab Spring, what could have started it, which is there's an anniversary now with that street vendor in Tunisia. And if it were you, if you were in Bradley Manning's position, and it looks like from everything that we've discussed, it's hard to imagine that he would get a fair trial. You know, it does look like the government is doing everything they can to go after him. For whistleblowers, looking at what's happened after WikiLeaks leaks, how the world has changed in the last year, is it still worth it? I mean, do you think that this is deterring somebody, or would you be willing to spend the rest of your life in jail?
The people I know who went to prison for nonviolent draft resistance during the Vietnam War, I don't know a single one who regretted the several years they had to spend. Not that they wanted it or that they enjoyed it, but I don't know of anybody who looked back. A much better example would be my friend Mordecai Vanunu in Israel, who spent 18.5 years in prison, 11.5 years in solitary confinement. And again, Amnesty and the others, that's worse than 10.5 months. The same principle of torture. He's always said to me, of course it's worthwhile. Of course I would do it again. Of course it was the right thing to do. And if Bradley Manning were to be convicted of the charges that he's credited with, as I say, but I really think that this is a man, he has not broken in the course of that isolation so far. He has not collaborated with the government. I don't think there's going to be any false confession against Assange with him. And he has, in this case, he hoped that there would be a real change in the world as a result of the information that was being put out in the chat logs That's what he said. Here's a man who
You
can
could
say
say
the
that there
entire
has
Middle
been
East was
a change.
We're
running
liberated.
out of time, gentlemen, so unfortunately I have to wrap it up. But really quickly, what else can we expect? How many more days of this hearing? Are there more protesters that are coming out, more actions, Kevin?
I know of no more protest actions that are planned, but I know that they are going to wrap on Friday, December 23rd. If they don't finish, I guess they return on Monday and they continue to finish this thing. Quickly, there's been a lot of stopping and starting. We spent a lot of time in recess, so I don't know how much business has actually been accomplished so far.
All right.
Well, when you say protester, I was saying with this Time Magazine Person of the Year, I think a face and a name could be put on that. Obviously, Mohammed Bouazizi, who 1 year ago burned himself, but also Bradley Manning, who, if he was the source of the WikiLeaks, which weeks before the burning revealed the corruption in Tunisia, which sparked the protests there and led to the Egypt protest and to the Occupy Wall Street protests.
Well, I can tell you that I don't think you're the only one that feels that way. I want to thank you both for joining me. I have to wrap it up, unfortunately, but thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.